You ever finish a book, close it, and immediately think, why am I not hearing more people talking about this? Not necessarily because the book is brand new, not necessarily because nobody has read it, but because based on how much I enjoyed it, how memorable it was, or how much it gave me to think about afterward, I expected to see it everywhere. And lately, I've realized I have quite a few books like that. I've got romance, I've got family drama, I've got a graphic novel based in Nigerian folklore, I've got a cozy murder mystery, and I have one horror book that had me lying in bed thinking, okay, but what exactly was making that noise in the woods? So today, I am sharing 6 books that I genuinely wish I heard more about, more readers talking about. And maybe by the end of this video, one of them will be going on your TBR.
Slow, turn the page, find your peace in this space, honey and prose. Welcome home.
Hey Book Nook crew, welcome back to Honey and Prose, about stories, softness, and the emotional experience of reading. And I want to make an important distinction before we get into these books. I am not calling these books hidden gems because that can get tricky. Some of these books may already have plenty of readers. Some of the authors are very well known. What I'm saying is this. In the reading space that I'm in, I personally don't hear these books discussed nearly as much as I think they deserve. And these are all books that gave me something. Some gave me romance. Some gave me atmosphere. Some gave me characters that I wanted to root for. One even gave me enough creepiness to make me question why people in horror books keep opening doors. Let's start with something a little softer. Higher Love gave me one of those romance setups that I just love. You're on a trip. You meet this beautiful man. Neither one of you is really looking for anything serious. And then, oops, now you're in love. There's just something about that setup that gets me every time. Because there's already this feeling of freedom when you're away from your regular life. You're somewhere different. Your routine is different. Maybe you're letting yourself relax in ways that you normally don't. And then here comes this man. Now you're supposed to be minding your business. You are not looking for a relationship. You're not trying to make any major life decisions. This is supposed to be fun. And then slowly that little, I'm not really ready for anything serious, starts turning into, well, wait a minute. That's what I loved about Higher Love. I enjoyed watching something that wasn't supposed to become serious start becoming very real. Because sometimes romance novels rush from attraction straight into, this is the love of my life. But I like watching that resistance, that moment when somebody has to admit, I know what I said, I know what I thought I wanted, but apparently my feelings did not get the memo. And another thing that I like is that this is part of a 3-book series. So if you enjoyed the world and the characters, this isn't one of those situations where you finish and go, well, now what? You have somewhere else to go. This is the book on the list for somebody who wants, I went away, met somebody fine, and accidentally caught feelings kind of romance. And sometimes that is exactly the reading experience I need. Now, this one gave me something completely different. What I loved most about Sisters with a Side of Greens was watching the sisters work toward repairing their relationship. Because I love stories about relationships that already have history. These aren't strangers learning each other. These are people who already know exactly where the sore spots are. They know the old arguments. They know what happened 20 years ago. They know what the other person said that they swear they forgave. But somehow they can't quote it word for word. That kind of relationship takes a completely different kind of work to repair. And I love that food, especially their mother's recipe, was part of what connected them. I am always a sucker for food being used as a memory in a story because recipes carry things. They carry people, they carry family history. Sometimes you can taste something and immediately remember the person who used to make it. You remember the kitchen, you remember the holidays, you remember being a child. So I love the way that shared recipe became connected to this larger story about family and reconciliation. But then there was another piece to the story that really touched me. The way they helped the younger woman through her pregnancy. And for me, that added another layer because now this wasn't simply about two sisters repairing what had gone wrong between them. It was also about women figuring out how to show up for a woman who needed them. And I love stories like that. Not because everything becomes perfect or because suddenly everybody agrees, but because people decide whatever happened between us, I am going to try. Sometimes reconciliation isn't one giant emotional speech. Sometimes it's food. Sometimes it's showing up. Sometimes it's doing the next right thing. And I thought this book handled that beautifully. If you like books about complicated sisters, family, history, food, forgiveness, and women finding their way back to one another, I really wish more people were talking about this one. Okay, Rhythm's Blues had me rooting for one thing from the very beginning. Rhythm, please choose yourself. Because sometimes when I'm reading romance, I'm not even worried about who the new man is yet. First, I need the women to realize, baby, this relationship is not it. And that was the satisfaction I got from watching Rhythm decide to think about her own needs. Because there's a certain point in a bad relationship where you have to stop asking, how can I make this work? And start asking, why am I working this hard to keep something that is making me miserable? That is a very different question. And I was glad to see her begin asking it. I wanted her to understand that wanting more doesn't make you selfish. Wanting respect doesn't make you demanding. Wanting to be loved well does not mean that you're asking too much. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop trying to convince somebody to give you what they clearly do not intend to give. And watching Rhythm get into a place where she could make room for something better, I enjoyed that. Because then the romance can be fun. Now, I can sit back and say, okay, who is this man? But first, we needed to clear that old situation out of the way. And this is another reason I like these kinds of romance stories. The new relationship isn't just about finding somebody attractive. Sometimes it represents the character finally believing, I deserve something different. And I was happy for Rhythm when she started moving toward that. Now, this one is probably the most visually distinctive book on my list. After the Rain is a graphic novel adaptation of Nnedi Okorafor's short story On the Road. And the story draws from Nigerian folklore surrounding the idea that during a storm, you do not open the door. Now, Book Nook crew, if folklore has survived long enough for somebody's grandmother to tell you, when it rains, don't open that door, I am not opening the door. I don't care who's knocking. Amazon can bring that package back tomorrow. But Chioma opens the door. And what follows is this really eerie supernatural story where the entity enters her life and begins essentially destroying it. And I love the storytelling. But because this is a graphic novel, the artwork added something that the prose alone couldn't have given me in exactly the same way. There are stories where the visuals are simply illustrating what you already understand. And then there are graphic novels where the artwork actually deepens the feelings of the story. That's what happened here for me. The imagery made the supernatural elements feel more unsettling. It made the folklore feel immediate. And because you're visually experiencing this transformation alongside Chioma, there was a different kind of intensity to it. But what stayed with me wasn't only the entity, it was the love from her grandmother and her aunt. Because underneath this supernatural story, there's also a story about family showing up when somebody is lost. Chioma is being affected by something that is bigger than she understands, and it is ultimately that connection to family, that love, the cultural knowledge, that willingness to fight for her, that really gave the story its emotional center for me. So yes, the creepy folklore drew me in. The artwork made it richer, but the grandmother and the aunt, that's what gave it heart. And if you're somebody who doesn't normally pick up a graphic novel, this is exactly the kind of book I'd recommend trying because you're not losing depth by reading it in a visual format. If anything, in this case, I think the visual storytelling gives a story another dimension. Now, we're going back to creepy. And when I say Stolen Tongues was creepy, I don't mean, oh, that's an interesting horror concept. I mean, I don't like that noise. Somebody turn a light on. What worked for me was how slowly the threat moved toward the main characters. It wasn't immediately, boom, monster. It starts with something out there, a sound in the woods, something unknown, something that doesn't quite make sense. And that kind of horror gets to me because your imagination starts filling in the gaps. If you show me the monster immediately, okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. But if you tell me there's something outside, no. Because now my brain has created 14 possibilities and every one of them is worse than whatever the author is actually going to show me. And then the girlfriend starts behaving strangely. She starts talking in her sleep. But she's not simply mumbling random things. She is communicating with this entity. And then there's her sleepwalking. And the closer this thing gets, the more you realize this isn't just something living out in the woods. It is becoming part of their lives. And I think one of the creepiest parts was when they thought that leaving the cabin would fix everything. Because that's what I would do. Oh, this cabin is haunted? Fantastic. You can have it. I'm going home. Except the entity follows them. And that's when horror gets me. Because now the safe solution has disappeared. You can't simply leave the spooky place. The spooky place came with you. And there is something so unsettling about a threat that becomes increasingly personal. It knows you. It gets closer. It starts communicating. It finds ways to reach you when you're vulnerable. And suddenly you realize, oh, we don't know how to get away from this. That slow escalation is what made Stolen Tongues memorable for me. If you're looking for horror that is more about sustained dread than simply gore and jump scares, this one genuinely creeped me out. And we are finished with something much cozier, although there is still a murder. Murder with a Side of Shrimp and Grits is a cozy mystery, and yes, I enjoyed the mystery. I wanted to know what happened. I wanted to see how everything came together. But you know what I ended up falling in love with? The Honeybee Diner. And I think that's one of the things that makes a cozy mystery work for me. The murder gets you into the story, but the place makes you want to stay. I loved learning the story behind the diner. I loved what it meant. And because I became attached to it, I really felt for Jesse when it seemed like everything connected to that place might be ruined. Because now the stakes weren't simply who committed the murder. It was what happens to this thing she loves. And that gives a mystery emotional stakes. I was rooting for Jessie. I loved her determination to figure out exactly what happened. Because she wasn't just being nosy for the sake of being nosy. Although, let's be honest, cozy mystery characters are often a little nosy. But she had something at stake. She needed answers. And I enjoyed watching her refuse to simply sit down and accept what was happening around her. And then you have the food, a diner, shrimp and grits, a murder. I mean, you kind of know what you're signing up for. But I walked away remembering the Honeybee Diner almost as much as I remember the mystery. And when a fictional place starts feeling like somewhere I would actually like to visit, the author got me. That's what made this one stand out. Looking at these 6 books together, they're really not similar at all. We've got romance, sisterhood, self-worth, Nigerian folklore, horror, a graphic novel, a cozy murder mystery. But I think that's exactly why I wanted to make this video, because sometimes we get so focused on whatever 5 books everybody is talking about at the moment that we forget how much good reading is sitting just outside of that conversation. And some of my favorite reading experiences happen when I stumble across something that wasn't already being recommended to me 12 times a day. There is something fun about being able to go, wait, have y'all read this? That's what I want Honey Prose to be. Of course, we're going to be talking about the big books. We're going to talk about the authors that everybody knows. But I also want to be the friend who occasionally reaches across the table and says, here, try this. Because maybe you've never read Alexandria House. Maybe you don't normally read graphic novels. Maybe horror isn't really your thing, or maybe you've been wanting a cozy murder mystery. Sometimes the book you end up loving is sitting just outside of whatever you normally reach for. And I want us to keep finding those books together. So Book Nook crew, now it's your turn. What is one book that you wish more people were talking about? And don't just drop the title. Tell me why. What did that book give you that made you finish it and think, why aren't more people reading this? Because I am always looking, as you know, for another book to add to my TBR, as though my TBR needs any assistance. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Honey Prose, and share it with a reader who is always looking for something different to pick up. And if you decide to read one of these 6 books because of this video, come back and tell me. I want to know what you thought. Now, drink something warm, pick up something good, and I will see you in the next chapter.
slow. Every line got a little soul. Turn the page, feel it in your bones. Honey and